This was an interesting photo to get because very little of it was planned, and it's just not something I set out to take. My kids have this little electronic bubble maker, and it's got like 4 AA batteries, and it's got this little pinwheel that spins around and shoots bubbles out, and it's just kind of a fun toy to get out and play with, especially during a summer of quarantine. And so one day we were out in the front yard, me and my wife and our boys were just making bubbles and swatting at the bubbles, and it occurred to me that I could try and get a picture of one of these bubbles. So that's what I set out to do here. And I don't know, I wasn't aiming for anything in particular. It was just a spur of the moment decision, but I thought it might be fun to try. And here's what I got. I don't know. One interesting part of this, if you look super closely, you can actually see me in the reflection holding my camera up. I think I've got a blue shirt on. This is the closest I've ever come to putting a selfie here on Weekly 50. So enjoy it while it lasts, because you won't see selfies here on Weekly 50 just as a general rule. It was a little tricky to get this photo because these bubbles are not they don't stay in one place, even with no wind, which when I shot this, there was basically no wind to speak of, but they're almost weightless. And so they just float around all over the place. And what I had to do was kind of look at this sea of bubbles in front of me as they're coming out of this bubble machine and just kind of pick one and hope it doesn't pop, because they pop right away. And so I had to kind of follow it around and autofocus on it, but these bubbles are moving every which way, and so it was a little tricky for the autofocus. And I used my D500, my D500, and I think with the 50mm lens, because I just wanted to fire off a rapid burst. That camera shoots at 10 frames a second, and this was the one that I liked that actually worked out. There were others that I liked that kind of didn't work out so quite as well. And shortly after this, as you might imagine, the bubble just popped. So the moment was gone in a bit of a split second. Not quite the split second like last week's photo of the water rocket, but still, it was a fun but tricky photo to take. And in fact, the most tricky part about this whole thing was deciding which image I wanted to put here on Weekly 50. You'll notice the bubble is framed against a dark background, and then there's the lighter colors kind of bordering the whole thing. Some of the photos I took were not like that, and you couldn't exactly plan this. You just had to go with wherever the bubbles happened to be and hope for the best. And this one ended up pretty good. There was others I took that I liked, but I didn't get quite the same contrast as this one, where you have the bubble isolated against this dark background. You'll notice the horizon is even tilted, and I think I shot it like that. It's not an intentional choice. I didn't tilt it in post or anything. I think my camera was just tilted a little bit when I shot it. And I actually had to crop way in because the original photo had some other bubbles. It's just hard to get a shot like this. And if you haven't tried it, I recommend giving it a try. Get some bubble mix and seeing if you can have an assistant or a kid just blow some bubbles and see if you can take a photo like this. It's a lot of fun to try, and you can kind of get some cool results.